So we'll be starting right now. Before we start, I'll just introduce myself. I am Alankrita. I am a third semester student from Masters in Applied Psychology from the School of Human Ecology at TIS Mumbai. And I'm also part of the Progressive Students Forum over here. So the NET sessions are something which are conducted by PSF every year, and this year is no different. We know that things have been tough with all our academic schedules being thrown off, so we hope that this session is helpful for those who are aspiring to take the exam and qualify a NET. So for today, our speakers will be three NET scholars. They are also members of PSF. We have Gautam, we have Meera, and we have Bhavya. And I would like to hand over the stage to them right now, and they'll take us through the session. After the session is over, you can ask them questions, but till then, I would request you to maybe just keep the questions in the chat, and after it's over, you can raise your hand and ask your questions. So I hope that helps, and yeah, you can go ahead, Gautam, Meera, and Bhavya.
Uh, Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So very good evening. We hope you're doing fine. Well. And this is our attempt, which we do almost every year, for many years now, to give as part of our academic, study initiative, academic help initiatives, which also includes the FC, uh, FC tutorials and other.
Do you have some audio issues? Something it's like.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible, but your voice is here and there missing.
Okay, just stop me if it continues. Okay. Okay, so this is an initiative which is done by the Academic Help Committee of PSF, which also includes sessions for your FC tutorial and other sessions for data analytics, other things which we've done over the years. Now, NetJRF is an important exam as far as somebody who's doing a master's is concerned, because it's the most important exam, which is also a qualification exam for if you are interested in academics, in both senses. If you're interested to teach, you want to teach directly, it is one of the qualification exam. And also, if you want to take up higher studies in terms of PhD and everything, it is also one of the biggest scholarships that is around, funding opportunities. And the exam, as you all know, is sort of it's in two papers. Paper one is a general paper, which is common across all the subjects, which tests your everything apart from.
Gautam, sorry for intervening. Some of the people are pointing it out that your voice is breaking in between. So it will be good if can you just try remove your that earphones and try.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
So as I was saying, paper one is a general paper, which tests you upon your different areas, which we will get into soon. And paper two is a subject-specific paper. Whichever subject you choose, be it sociology, economics, whatever. There are so many subjects. Now, this particular session, we will cover paper one, because that's the one area where a lot of people need some sort of support, because it's not subject specific. Subject is you can do by yourself. But these include a lot of subjects, like a lot of areas which you don't generally sort of after a point involve yourself with on a daily basis. Listening and teaching aptitude and comprehension. So we'll first go into a broad overview of what paper one includes, Mira, can we have the PPT? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is a broad syllabus of paper 1, which includes first is teaching aptitude, then there is research aptitude, comprehension, communication, mathematical reasoning and aptitude, logical reasoning, data interpretation, and these last three are more of a general subject in the sense that ICT and people development and environment, these are all recent additions, especially the people development environment and higher education system, in which these last three are generally on your general knowledge on the broad topic. If it's some sort of a broad understanding of what's happening around, let's say, environment and development policy. And higher education system is sort of about your, what do you say, the broad overview of India's higher education system, which are the, what is the structure like, which are the key agencies, what are the key policies and things like that. Now, okay, before we move into the next, the session per se, we just like to emphasize that, the intent of this session is not to, teach you questions from these sections per se. That's not the intent, because that requires a lot more time and a lot of resources which in an online mode we do not have with us. But what we would focus is more of what are the key aspects of each of these sections. What are the key subtopics, key areas within these different units, which you can sort of keep an eye out for when you're preparing for. What are the broad themes that are generally covered, and how to sort of generally approach these questions. So keep that in mind, please. And also for specific problem solving of this particular these specific units, there are a lot of resources available on YouTube in all the in possibly all the languages. You just have to search it. Like, for instance, if you're specific kind of a question you have a problem with, let's say in mathematical or anything, just go ahead and search. You'll find a lot of resources. So this session, as I was saying, is just putting together to give you a broad idea. Okay, now let's move on. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. Now I'll start with mathematical reasoning. This broadly, as the word suggests, it is a lot with numbers and things, but it's numbers are not the only thing. Okay? Everything that is non-verbal in that sense, that's not pictorial, would fall under mathematical. But a very important part is, of course, numbers, which is your series completion. You must have come across this in different kind of exams, or coding or decoding, or classification, which means finding some sort of an odd member out from a given group, things like that, or analogous relationships, which is basically if this is like this, then what is this like, or give you a set of members in a group and say that okay, in the given choice, what fits into this group. And the next set of questions are some questions are about maybe about directions. One person travels this much and not so much, and finally where is he from the starting position? Questions like that. Or questions could be which include some sort of a Venn diagram. There could even be questions which are related to some sort of blood relationships. A is B's father and D is B's uncle, and so what is F to A and stuff like that. So this is a broad outline of it. Now I'll quickly go through some sort of number series. Because number series is an important part. It gets asked every single time. One sort of question that comes out is always prime numbers. They're like you're given a set of consecutive prime numbers. What are prime numbers? Prime numbers are those numbers which can only be divided by that number and 1. Okay, something like a 5, 3, 7. They cannot be divided by anything else. Like a 7 cannot be divided by any other number other than 7 or 1. Or you're given a set of prime numbers, let's say 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. What's the next? The consecutive prime numbers. Sometimes you're given alternative prime numbers. So look for these patterns. Next kind of very frequently asked series is a difference series, where each term will have a difference, like a fixed difference between each terms, and then you're asked to figure out what is the missing term. So sometimes the difference would be a fixed, let's say a 3 between each term. Sometimes the difference could have a pattern. For example, between the first and second, like the difference would be 1, between second and third 2, and then difference keeps increasing. So keep a lookout for that. Next kind is definitely a multiplication series where each term is multiplied by a particular number. Next, please. Like I've given a few examples here. Like after multiplication, obviously it could be a division series where each term is divided by a fixed number. The next set of numbers series that are generally asked, is a what's called an n square series. N square series is every term is a square of a particular number. So it could be a square of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 square, 2 square, 3 square, 4 square, or it could be they might skip some squares. So 1 square, 3 square, 5 square, or 2 square, 4 square, 6 square. So keep a rough idea about the basic squares of from 1 to 10 at least. That really helps. Some number stands out. So when you see a 25 and a 36 in one series, your mind should first go to, okay, is that a square series? 36 is 6 square, 25 is 5 square. Now, next is very related to the n square series, but you have a squared of each term, but you add a 1 or minus, or you add 1 or you take away 1 from it. So n square minus 1 or n square plus 1. So, 1 square plus 1, 2 square plus 1, 3 square plus 1, or 1 square minus 1, 2 square minus 1, 3 square minus 1, stuff like that. So these are the generally what are asked, but there are some times where they even asked, like instead of n square, you have a cube series, but they don't generally ask it too frequently because to remember cubes of slightly not as easy as square. But there have been instances when it's been. Next, please. Now, after number series, next are letter series. Similar to number series, related to number series, because the trick to solving this series is also, assigning number to these letters. How do you assign number to the letters? On the order of alphabets. A is 1, B is 2, so on and so forth, and reverse. Okay, so you need to be able to associate number to each alphabet, and then you're asked a question. So just remember that the forward order would be A is 1, B is 2, and so on and so forth. Z is 26. Reverse would be Z is 1, Y is 2, X is 3, and A is 26. Some useful tips: the first half of the alphabet is 1 to 13, which is A to M. Okay, that's the first half of English alphabet. And N to Z is the second half, which is 14 to 26. And to give you some sense of the relative position of numbers, E is 5, J is 10, O is 15, T is 20, and Y is 25. Now, just remember that if you code alphabets to numbers, that you add the position of one number and its position on the forward order and the reverse order would always add up to 27. For example, A is 1, and in the reverse order, A is 26. So if you add, they add up to 1, like 27, right? So if you come to the series, there's a constant number. So it sort of helps you to have some sense of what's happening. Now, generally in this kind of question, what's asked is, for example, there is a fixed increase between these alphabets. So they add by 2. So if it's A, then you skip B, C, and then D, or stuff like that. Or they increase by a fixed order, between the first and second alphabet, it's like it's an increase of, let's say, 1, and between the second and third is an increase of 2, so on and so forth. So when you find these questions, the first thing to do is just write the alphabet, the English alphabets from 1 to Z on your whatever worksheet that you get in the exam, so that like any question which has a letter series, you can just refer back to that what you've written down and get the answer quickly. Okay? Do not try to solve this in your head. I mean, unless you very quickly find a pattern, then you can do it. And always in these questions, use elimination. If you think this one answer cannot be it, so just keep it aside. Next. Now, similar to this single letter series is obviously a combined 2-letter, where it's each term is a set of 2 alphabets, and the first of each set would follow one logic, and the second would follow a different logic. But the logic would be the same as before. For all of this, again, code each alphabet into its numerical equivalent. Now, next kind of question is some sort of a coding, alphabetical coding. For example, like I put a question here: if belongings is given as table stuff, TABLESTESF. These kind of questions, it's fairly straightforward. Just take and see what each number is coded as. I mean, generally it's very arbitrarily coded. For example, in this, B is T and E is A, L is B. So write it down, and from what the question gives you, from the information that the question gives you, you can make out the answer of the question. For example, what is linen here? So you just have to look at, okay, what is L coded as in the first part? So you see that L is B, and then I is T, and so on and so forth. So you get the answer. So that answer, if you look at it, it becomes B, T, E, A, E. So it's got no logic outside of the question. Okay, like the logic to it is given in the question. There's no logic outside of it. So just have to figure out what the coding is like. Next. So now there are certain kind of questions where they give you letters as coded into numbers. So just follow the same numbers. What letter is coded into what number, and the question that is asked will obviously have all the alphabets of the first information given. So you can just figure it out from that. Now, the same way, sometimes they also ask coded statement, but for the same logic. From the given information, get the code, what is being coded, and the question asked will have all the details in the information already given for you to figure it out. Now, the other kind of questions which are also, one is to generally, finding the odd word, which doesn't fit in the group. So every member in that group will have a one common trait, but one would not. They generally, it's very easy. It sort of strikes you when you look at the question. Odd numeral or odd pair of words. Sometimes it's a direct analogy kind of a question. For example, if apparel is related to cloth, then footwear is related to what? It would be leather, because both are made by the former. Or analogous pairs, same. Now, questions using family tree, always try to draw it down. Okay, you make a family tree. If it's in the same generation, make siblings come in the below. So just try to draw it down. Do not try to work it out in your head. Great, but generally, it's a good practice to draw it down using some graphical family tree, and also just brush up on all these terms. What is an uncle, aunt, niece, in-law, all that kind of stuff. One kind of question again is based on directions, which is basically if some person A starts from, he travels 10 kilometers to the north, and then 5 kilometers to the west, and then 6 kilometers to the east. And then how far is he from the initial position? So just keep drawing these lines. They're all 90-degree lines. So a good thumb rule is to use the map thing. North is up, south is down, west is left, and east is right. Just keep following the path, and finally it's just a matter of what is the distance of the line. So it's generally a square or something like that, or rectangle. Easily fill it out. Next. Okay. Next is data interpretation. Now, data interpretation is generally you are given a set of data. Can you just give me a second? My charger is, I need to charge my laptop. Give me 1 second, please. So sorry for the interruption. I got to charge my laptop. Okay, now you are given data in some form. The most common forms are, it's a tabular format, or you're going a bar chart or a pie chart, histograms, and you are asked a certain set of questions based on the given data. Now, the most commonly asked is the table. So you have a compound table of, one rough example is, so many years and so many numbers. Now you're asked, what is the change in from year this thing to year this thing, or stuff like that. What is the total number of some quantity across the years? So first thing in this is to study the table very well. When you see the table or when you see the data in whichever form it's presented, to really study it, what is being said, what does each column stand for, what does each row stand for. Then take a look at the question. Okay? Now you have some sense of what the question is asked. Now understand the table, rows, columns. What is a unit again? What is the unit that being given? Maybe if it's some sort of money, it's maybe rupees or something, maybe or days, or it's some quantity, something. What is the time period that is given? Now, this data interpretation also requires some basic brushing up of your, let's say, school math in some sense of ratio, proportion, averages, percentages, number, profit, loss. Because generally in these questions, they ask you, what is the change of some quantity over some period of time? What is the average of certain quantities over some period of time? Basic stuff, but just practicing these questions really help, like in terms of increasing your speed and all that. It will not involve very long calculations and computations. If you feel that there is some part of it which is taking long, especially for data interpretation and even for the previous section, it's a good idea to keep it for later. Okay? It's not a good idea to get stuck in this and then wastes time and you get sort of nervous and it sort of affects everything that comes later. So just take some time. If it doesn't lead to an answer very quickly, don't spend too much time. You can come back to it at the end. And these sections will also have an option where you can avoid certain choices given. As by looking at the data that, okay, of the 4 choices, 2 just cannot be. They just are very far apart. Get some sense of it. Next. Okay. Just the quick stuff, the most important thing is definitely brushing up on your what is ratio, what is proportion, what is fractions, how they're related. Okay. For example, how a fraction, for example, if let me give an example on this. When I tell that fraction and proportions are related, what do I mean? For example, I have 2 fruits. One is an apple, one is an orange. Now, if what is the proportion? Okay, what is the ratio between apple and orange in this? It's 1:1. That's 1 apple, 1 orange. Now, what percentage of the total number of fruits is an apple? 50%, right? There are 2, of which 1 is a apple. 50%. Now, what fraction is it? It's 1/2. So 1:1, the ratio of 1:1 of apple to orange is the same as 1/half. When you say 1/2, it's half. Half apple is the same as 50% apple. Now that's how it's related. Okay, now one thing that I'll flag is definitely is that people seem to get wrong. How do you calculate change in a percentage? What is a percentage change? People often confuse the base that is used. Okay, for example, if let's say a figure, give an example here. For example, something is X quantity in 1990 and Y quantity in 2000. If the question is what is the change of this quantity with respect to 1990, you know that the change is a difference. So X, Y minus X, because later quantity. The confusion sometimes is that what is the denominator that I use? Okay, now it is the base should be the quantity that to which it is compared against. So here with respect to 1990. So if you have a question with respect to 1990, let's say with respect to some year or something, it is the number of for that year that you should use as the base. Do not use the later number as a base. You'll get it completely wrong. Right? So just keep track of this, because this is something that I've seen over the last some sessions that some people have a confusion over. Some sort of questions is some quantity increases first by X%, then by Y%. So what is the total increase or decrease? That's a very quick formula given there. Now just brush up on your arithmetic mean. What's a mean? It's a sum of numbers by the number of numbers. And time, speed, and distance. What is speed? Distance by time. Okay. Now just brush up on all this, and I cannot stress this enough. The most important thing in data interpretation is practice. Okay, you might get the theory of it, but practice really helps. There are some times where some questions which you can do it maybe in the exam, you might spend time figuring it out. So if you've already done it, the technique really hits you really fast. So like instead of you having to sit there and figure out from the basics, if you've done it, you quickly know what's to be done. Next. Okay, now I covered data interpretation also. Now this section is teaching aptitude. To be frank, there is it covers a broad area. Now, this is generally to test your theoretical knowledge, quote unquote, about teaching. You can have different opinions about its importance. I do. You also might have it. You might find it, why is it even there? But it's there, so you have to study it, or at least you have to go through it. The broad areas it covers is what is the concept of teaching, different objectives of teaching, levels of teaching, and stuff like that. Or some questions are about characteristics of different kind of learners, or factors affecting teaching, and methods of teaching. That's one. Teacher-centered, learner-centered, offline, online, massively online courses. Now there is definitely different kinds of support systems, traditional ICT based, or different kind of evaluation systems. Now, you really cannot learn all of this, obviously. Right? So the best, again, I would definitely suggest that do some previous question papers, see what are the key themes that are getting asked, and then sort of make some notes. There are some resources online which you can have it, which you can refer to, which gives some sort of a gist of the key theoretical aspects of it. You can go through it. Apart from that, there's not a lot that we can, in that sense, learn except learning some theory on this, which comes only by doing some previous question papers and everything. But this solving previous question papers holds true for every other section. Definitely. Okay? There's nothing better than solving previous question papers for that. So I'll just stop here and I'll pass on to Bhavya and Meera now. If there's something specific, we can take it up later. Thank you.
I hope I'm audible to you all. Good evening, I'm Bhavya here. I'm with another set of topics here. So before start, I would like to say you all like it's very simple topic compared to the other logical and mathematical things. This is a very basic things which many of us will know all these things. As you are going to enter into a research or for an academic field, you should know basic of the things. So related to ICTC, higher education and environment, these are very basic things that all of us should know. And you get these things from your social media, your newspaper reading, or your news seeing in the TVs. So I'll just go through and I tried to highlight which are the main areas that you should look up. So if you look to information and communication technology, you have to look for the abbreviations like we have HTML and IN. It stands for India. All these basic things, GOV. What are these basic terminologies which used in IT field? Next, you had to look for the basics of internet, intranet, like what is LAN, WAN, then email. So email, you use the word BCC. So what it stands for. So that type of things you have to know. What is the input device, output device, what is comprised of ICT as a general. And second part is digital initiatives in higher education. This is some more current in this time, because earlier it was not much focus over this area, but due to the COVID and everything, lots of discussion are happening over this area. So I would like to take some time and look what are these programs. Then ICT and governance. Here we use what are the governance sector, what are the ICT methods we are using. Like we have IRCTC. So all these things will come here. So can I have the next slide, please? Hello.
Is it not this one, Bhavya?
Yeah, this one. So as I already told, digital initiatives, we had to give some attention towards here. Can I have the earlier slide? There was one more slide before. It says about SWAYAM, the earlier one. Please go backward, Meera. You're going forward. Yeah, this one. So as SWAYAM is a steady web of active learning for young aspiring minds. So here we focus on lots of online courses are going. So that whole set of online courses known as online course. It's only for you along with your courses. So it is under earlier it was under MNHRD, so now it's under Ministry of Education and with the help of Microsoft. So whenever you look for any initiatives, just hide any software is involved. So these are and full form. These are the main things. Only that much you want to look. Don't go in depth over there. You just need a periphery of the knowledge. So next is National Digital Library. It is under National Mission on Education through Information Communication Technology. It helped to bridge all the libraries and connected with the online learning process. So it is done by the IIT Kharagpur under development. It's a project under development of National Digital Library of India. So next slide, please. So as all these programs, you just want to know the names and who are the main organization or government body involved on that. So next is Swayamprabha. It's a 32 DTH channels, 24/7 for education purpose, GSAT 15 satellite. Next is influence. Influence is very relevant for your academic works in TIS also, because it is a connection of the library network under UGC, and it is a program initiated under UGC in 1991. It's actually a digital network of your, we can across the country, you can get the PhD thesis and other literature where you need. So this can also be an added thing for your assignments and other programs and thesis writing in TIS also, you can use this. So next slide. So we can quickly look on what type of questions will come. As I already mentioned, it should be very simple type questions used to come. Which of the following file format is not a video file format? So we know the file extensions. So here JPEG, it's a image file. First, everything is video file format. So I already told you on the DOC, HTML, all these basic things we should know. So next is, which of the following is a non-conventional learning program in higher education? So there is SWAYAM is there, face-to-face teaching learning is here, tutorial, seminar. So here the answer will be SWAYAM. Next, please. So next is about people development and environment. So as I earlier mentioned, this is also a very basic thing, but environment is always in our very hot subject. So we should look on what are the sustainable development goals, which we could not achieve much. Then we have sustainable, there was earlier Millennium Development Goals. Now we have sustainable development goals. Then we have how the pollution is happening. What is the anthropogenic activities is causing pollution and environmental degradation? What is the local, regional, global problems are happening? And what are the major pollutants towards health affecting our health? There are energy resources are there. Natural disasters. So just look on what are the major natural disasters happened in India. Just focus on India only, not there was no much global thing would come. Next, focus on Environmental Protection Act. Why this topic is very important? Because recently we had the IPCC report come, and I hope you all are seeing this on all the what are the indicator which India achieved and everything. So you can just look on. I'm just again telling you, it's not mandatory like you should know all the SDG goals and everything, but you just need a broad idea. Okay, if you know the broad idea, you can eliminate the unwanted answers and then you can come into the answers. So there are Environmental Protection Act is here, 1986. Then National Action Plan is here, Montreal Protocol, Rio Summit, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement. So all these things we should know what it is stands for. Next slide. Yeah, so I just try to highlight like how you can prepare. So I have not gone through all the legislation. I just focus on environmental protection umbrella term, because this act actually helped to understand what is environment, what is eco-sensitive zone, and it is after the Bhopal tragedy. And the ministry involved is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and also the UN Conference on Human Environment of 1972. These two was the reason to happen this thing. So you just go to ministry's website, Environment Ministry's website. You can see the major legislations. So you just make a bullet point like this, just the name, which are the agency or anything specific is happened during that legislation. Only that much, nothing more you should go. There is no need to go in depthly. Next is National Action Plan on Climate Change 2008. So there was 8 mission was there. So you just go through what are the mission, just know the names. So if you go for the global initiatives, yeah, it's okay, Mira, we can go for the next one. So if for a global initiative, I just put up a timeline. So where you can see what all things are happened. So 1988, we have IPCC. Again, I'm stressing why we need to look for IPCC, because we recently had the report. So I'm just telling, don't go to in-depth, just to know what are the activities they are broadly looking. 1992, there is Rio Summit happened. 1994, UNFCCC has happened. Just look the full form also, UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Then for COP happened, 1997 Kyoto Protocol happened. What is Kyoto Protocol? It stands for greenhouse gas emission, to reduce greenhouse gas emission. Then look for India. What is India's stand? Is India ratified it, or is it India hold that thing? So we should know with reference to India, we should look for the global initiatives. So 2002, India ratified the Kyoto Protocol. 2005, Kyoto Protocol came into force. Then we had Doha Amendment 2012. 2015, we have Paris Climate Agreement. 2015, we have International Solar Alliance. This is India's initiative. So we should know, as a Indian, we should know what all things India do. Then 2018, we have Katowice Climate Package. I just tried to summarize few of the main. If you go and see, you can have lots of things. I would suggest just go through the Google and just highlight the names and the year and what are the main objective, nothing more on that. And India stand also. Next slide. Yeah, so as somebody asked about SDGs, I just tried to put what is India stand on SDG with according to state, okay, which help us to know what are the things. So SDG, we have 17 goals and 169 target, and it is still 2030. So we can just see what are the indicators and just see which all are the state is best performing, worst performing. It's not always asked, but there is a chances that its things will be asked. So just to know the broad idea, nothing in depth. So next slide. So here I'm put one question. It is believed that our global warming is progressively, the global warming will be eventually resulted in increase in availability of usage land, uniformity of climate at equator and poles, fall in sea level, melting of polar ice. So if you don't look on these things also, you can understand global warming result in the polar ice. It's not for the sea level, because sea level will increase only, not reduce. So you can with your common sense knowledge, you can come into this session. So environment is not a big deal. You can just brush up your knowledge, just focus on the current affairs, what things are happening. Yeah, next slide. So next section is about higher education. So this is also important because you are going into and you are part of a higher education system as a master's student. Next, you are going in a research or in an academic field, you're going to in the higher education. So we should know how these things are happened. So we should know the institutions what are involved in ancient time, then post-independence, then oriental, conventional, non-conventional, then what are the professional, technical, skill-based, then what is value education and environmental education, and major policies. So now we have NEP 2020. So we should know about that policies. So just I'm putting some statistics. There is a chance of asking statistics, not mandatory, but still we should know their enrollment rate was increasing. But this is report before the COVID. So obviously there will be higher only. So after that, there was changes happen. Then next is NIR. So it is also important because recently the ranking came and IIT Madras was the top. So you should know I hope you are getting the connection, like always the syllabus should be connected with the current affairs. So it will help you to know things better. So next slide. So here I put one framework which help you to study better. So as a pyramid, there are three things there. We have policy, how the education is coming. We have regulation, who is regulating this, and accreditation, who is giving the accreditation. So policy, we have Ministry of Education, Association of Indian Universities, CBSE, and SCRT, State Council of Higher Education is there. For regulating these all agencies, we have University Grants Commission, Medical Council of India, ICSSR. So just look for these all things. What stands ICSSR stands for? What is its full form? Which year it was started? Then we have accreditation. Accreditation is NAAC. There are two National Board of Accreditation is there, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. So this help you to know what is higher education in India. So other than that, we all know that there are IITs are there, IIMs are there. Then we have central universities, state universities. So, and also institute like this, there is a deemed university and entire structure of private university. So there is nothing to go and see how many universities, but just broadly, we should know how our higher education system is working in India. Next slide. So there was a Vedic education was there, then Brahminic education, Buddhist education, then we had colonial education, colonial tried to understand how is in we got to know about the English literature and other things. Then we had the independence. So after independence, we had different commissions like Radhakrishnan Commission. So as a story, we all know, we have seen these things in our history. So just
Is
Did Bhavya just leave or something?
I think it's
no,
her
no, I
network
just came
issue.
back. My net. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Bhavya, maybe you can off the video, like if the
No, it was some technical issue. It's
okay. Okay.
I think I just, yeah, I will just brush up from here. I hope you may not audible here. So, yeah, so higher education, I think we need to look from the, not in depth to the history part. I'm not here, we are not going to our old histories, but just to brush up what all things had happened and just focus from the colonial education. There was Oriental learning was there, were Britishers tried to learn from Indian cultures, everything. Then we have Anglicization happened. We have whole English education was introduced. We all know why we have this English education. Then after independence, we have different policies. So focus on higher education part, what things have been changed. Like Radhakrishnan Commission is there, Senior Secondary Education Commission is there, Kothari Commission. Just see the year and the committee, what its committee was meant for. Then look for the UGC because UGC has a major role in higher education. So look for their functions and what are the major activities done by the UGC and programs initiated by UGC. Because that area you should look a little more emphasis you should give it rather than the other history part. Next slide. Yeah. So here comes, yes, I just put one question also, how the questions would come. Main aim of the faculty recharge scheme of UGC. So it was to address the shortage of faculty in higher education institutions. So it will be very basic questions you ask. So if you just go through the UGC website and this environment website, at least for once, and Ministry of Education website, then you can know about what all the activities are here and how to see the recent initiative, like there are lots of digital learning coming. So just focus on that. Yeah. Now I like to welcome Meera.
Yeah. Now we have some more portions to cover, and it's like already been a little more time is being taken. So there are two types of questions that is always coming in the paper 1 series, and one type of question is just testing your memory. So in order to learn these kinds of portion, the only way is to practice papers. Previous papers is the practicing it all over again and again is the only way we can kind of learn those questions and answers. Compared to the some of the past years, I would say it is a little more the material or the question papers, like the number of questions have kind of that we get has increased, because earlier it was a written exam and there was only like maybe like 2 shift and all, but with the COVID there has been a lot of shift that is happening, and as this shift increases there are more question papers also. So I would always recommend go through all the question papers, and especially because paper 1 is kind of common to all. So there is a chance that you'll get more number of questions, and practicing it makes you kind of get to the cutoff score. So the portion of communication is just based on your memory, I would say. you need to know what are the different concepts, what are the different branches under the concept. So I'll just brush up through some of the important concepts that you should never miss. You should never miss, in the sense, there might be people who have been kind of started their preparation for the NIT like maybe 1 month before, and there might be also somebody who's going to start right maybe from today. What I would suggest is that people who have already looked into the portions, just make sure that these concepts and portions are not missed. And people who are trying to cover the portion, also make sure that these concepts are covered first, and then only go to the other portions where mainly more in-depth manner you can go through after that. So as you can see, communication, there are some questions which you might feel that questions on the teaching aptitude, and the questions on the communication might be kind of overlapping, and sometimes you might be even confused that is this relating to the communication area or is it relating to the teaching aptitude, because there are some overlaps between certain concepts. So as in you can see what are the types of communication, or what is the features of communication, and they might ask for certain models that are present in the communication, and also the questions relating to types of communication, as I just mentioned, as in verbal, non-verbal. These are some of the basic things we might have even come across like in the daily life, but it can also go into questions on certain types where sometimes they might be asking what is the important element of this communication. So you just need to have a broad idea on what this concept looks like. And also one important question that has always repeated is the communication process. What are the different steps that is involved in the communication process? You need to know, like, what is the beginning, what is the end. So this process of communication is something that is repeatedly asked, such as like sequence of communication, how it is happening. And now next one important concept is what is the levels and barriers. There might be questions asking kindly answer the question of like which of the barrier is faced in this type of communication, maybe in a non-verbal communication, which is the most prominent barrier that one face. So barriers of communication is something that you need to look on. And then there are certain components of communication such as signs, feedback, sender, receiver, message, medium. So these components, just understand what these looks, what all these concepts are defined in terms of, because sometimes what happened is that there might be some questions and the options, in the options you can find these elements. Then you should be, if you know what exactly the word means, then there's a chance that you can eliminate those options. If you are not trying to get the answer correct, then the second method is to eliminate the least possible answers. So if you know at least what all these concepts looks like, then there's a chance that for the other question you might not be very sure, but then you have a possibility of two options which might be right. Then the other options you can eliminate and go ahead. So that is one way how we approach a question which we are not sure that much of. And then there are classroom communication. So classroom communication is a concept which I have just said that it overlaps with the teaching aptitude. So it can be asked like what is the what should be the not perfect but the classroom communication that a student and a teacher have. What kind of barrier does a student face in terms of face-to-face communication? So those questions can be asked. And there are also types of media. So media, as you can see, there are mass media, which are the modern mass media that is being used, as in terms of internet has widened. So what are some of the elements relating to the same? And it might be also that these questions are not asked directly. These questions might be also asked in the form of assertion and statements. So there might be some two statements that is stating of some concept of under the communication, and then you might be asked like whether these statements are true or is it false, or does these two statement leads to the conclusion that is given in the question. So this format also, these questions can appear. And as I said before, while preparing, you go through all the questions relating to communication, and that's the only way you can figure it out, like in answering. And going into research aptitude, I believe most of them might be in their second year, and during your first year, you might have come across both the two types of research methodologies, which is quantitative and qualitative. So some of the concepts that you will be referring for while preparing for the NET exam, you would have always covered in your first year. So it will be a little more easy when compared to other areas. So they might ask for what are the different types of research, certain characteristics. And as you can see, there are different methods such as experimental research, qualitative, quantitative, descriptive. And steps of research, I would say, is the most repeated question. They'll ask for, they might even ask as in, the steps will be given and the order might be in the order, which is the order in how the research happens. Please kind of answer the question of, as in, which is the order how research happens. So, or they might even ask like, there are these 3 steps that is happening in research. What will be the 4th step in the research? So, what is exactly this steps of research is something that you should never miss. And apart from all the research questions, there can be questions on particularly to a thesis or an article. So formats of how a dissertation appears or how an article is written is something which is like kind of important. And referencing also, sometimes questions are asked in like which kind of referencing does this apply to. So referencing, I think most of them might be even starting to refer you the articles that you are preparing reading for the assignment. So I think just understand what all referencing format exists, and that can give you an idea on the same. And also some of the application of, as just Bhavya mentioned, ICT in a research is also sometimes covered. And sometimes questions on research ethics are also coming in these question papers. So this I have just prepared a table wherein these terms you can see in every question papers. At least you can see like one question, like either one of the concept is being asked in every question paper, where as you can see questions relating to hypothesis, variable. So what I would say is that these are very small elements of a larger concepts of what are the kinds of research, what are the characteristics, or what are the methods that is involved. So while you are brushing up on the important concepts only, these small elements or small concepts, you can just note it down along with the major concepts, and you can just understand what that exactly means. And you'll be able to at least kind of answer the questions that relate when it comes to that. And as I mentioned before, research designs are kind of repeated question. And when it comes to the 2 important methodologies that is happening, 2 of them are there, quantitative and qualitative research. So understand what are the methods that are under the quantitative method, what are the methods under qualitative, how are the tools different of these 2 research paradigm, or what are the sources of data that is there. Sampling, I would say, is the most repeated question. They can either ask for to say which of the sampling mentioned is a probability sampling, or which of the sampling that is given in the option is a non-probability sampling. So understanding this, what is probability sampling, what are the sampling methods that are coming under the probability sampling, non-probability sampling, that will be of help. And as I just mentioned, reference, bibliography, citation, and plagiarism, even though they are not repeated questions, but like one question and all pertaining to the same can appear. And I just mentioned format of different presentation, like workshop, thesis writing, article. So how does this, what are the steps or elements relating to the thing, can be also kind of not a very repeated question, I would say. But then this would actually, because anyway, if a single question appears and if you have an idea, it will be like adding to your marks. And now coming into comprehension, so some people might feel that comprehension is a very difficult area where you are losing out all your time reading the whole passage and trying to understand what it looks like and trying to understand the answer. So because it will be a very long passage and going through each and every line, that might be a little time consuming. At the same time, there are people who are who feel that comprehension is a part where they can score the marks, because obviously you don't need to think, or you not in the sense of thinking, but you don't need to memorize something before the exam for a comprehension, because it is just pertaining to that question paper, and the answers are found from the passage only. But there are some certain tips or tricks that you can follow in order to just cut out the time that you're spending for comprehension. So as I just said, one one way how we will approach a comprehension is to practice it and see how much of strength do you have in attending a comprehension. Does it look like very difficult part, or does it look like an easy part for you? How much of the time are you spending on each comprehension? So practicing is one way, and finding out how much of problem is comprehension for you. So while you start to read comprehension, and I would say it is based on this, that you should you should have a plan of whether to attend this comprehension in the initial part of the when the exam starts, or at the end. So depending on the time that you spend on a comprehension determines whether you need to attend the comprehension in the first part, or do you need to attend at the last when all your question, all the sections have completed. And while understanding the passage, just look through what is this passage saying about. Is it saying about some phenomenon, or is it saying some of the events, or is it some historical event that has been explained? So what is this author actually looking at? Is the author explaining what all happened, or is it author explaining what is happening currently? So that is something that we always need to keep in our mind while we are reading. And generally there will be a main idea in the passage, and there will be some details pertaining to that. That is how a paragraph, or a comprehension is kind of figured out. And questions, when you look into the question, there can be questions on specific information which is mentioned in the passage itself, where you just have to look for the keyword. So there will be some keywords in the questions, and these keywords can also appear in the passage, so that you can easily identify those, and and then you can just go and read that particular line and then fill the question. But there might be also some questions that might ask for a general overview. So these questions can only be attended once you understand what this passage is about, or what is this author trying to say. The other questions, even if you don't understand the passage, you might be able to answer, because you can find the keywords. But for the questions which is asking about the general overview or the general theme of the passage, you need to understand what the passage is saying. So one way is to eliminate, as I said. Like, if you feel that this, what is the theme of a passage they are asking, and if you feel that this theme that is mentioned in the options are no way relating to the passage, eliminate those, and just try to have the possibility of which are the themes which is closely related to this comprehension. In that way you'll be able to answer the question. And as I just said before, should we, some of the questions that students always ask is that, should we read the passage first and then attend the question, or should we first read the questions and then read the passage? So this, I would say, most of the people say that you should read the question first and then read the comprehension, because when we read the question, we know what exactly we need to look for in the passage. But again, I would say it depends on each one, because how not everybody is comfortable with memorizing, like kind of keeping it in your head, like what that question is relating to, and then remembering the question and while reading the passage. So not everybody is able to do that. So I would say practice it and find out, is it reading the passage and then attending the question easy for you, or is it the other way? So that is one way how you have to figure it out in that. And always do not, so comprehension is not a place where your knowledge is tested. There might be a question where which is asked where you know the subject, or your knowledge is there, but comprehension is never testing that. What comprehension is comprehension is looking is whether you are able to understand what is given. So do not make any assumptions or do not give whatever you know, which is not at all relating to the comprehension and answer those questions. That might be wrong in the answer. And moving on to the logical part, so there are two kind of questions that is asked in the logical reasoning, which is based on a theory and a practical. So theory wise, you will have to memorize or you will have to learn things and then answer it accordingly. And practically, they'll be asking for some questions where you have to apply some of the reasoning. So majorly there will be some arguments given, there will be a premises. So premises actually leads to a conclusion, and there will be a different types of arguments. They might even ask theoretically, like what is an inductive argument, what is a deductive argument, and abductive argument. So both theoretical also you need to know what it means, and also when you need to understand, like you can go through and see the example how an inductive argument looks like. They might even ask like what does this argument looks like. So that is like a practical level question. So that will those two types of questions can come. And next is, as I just mentioned like previously also, there might be assertion and reason statement. So there will be some reasons given and an assertion. So from the reasons we have to kind of comprehend whether the assertion given is true or false. So this format of questions might also appear in other areas. So let's say research or teaching aptitude. So they might also give some assertion and reason statements relating to these topics too. Then you are asked whether are these reasons given in the question justifiable, or is it leading to the truth of the assertion. So you just need to read it out and see whether it's true or false, and then answer this question. And analogies are also repeated question. So as you can just see, I'm just put an example of like, if frown means pain, then what does smile mean? So what is a similar kind of logic that we need to apply? So this kind of analogy is like a repeated question. And then there are 4 categorical propositions. And these, I would say, go and watch some of the videos where they explain how to actually find whether a proposition is like a positive, negative, particular, positive. Because unless you don't understand how the concept works, you will not be even able to kind of eliminate and also answer, because this is purely based on the reasoning, and you need to understand what it means and how to actually solve this question. So understanding and it is through square of opposition that you kind of conclude that whether a proposition is negative, positive, or not. So there are a lot of videos that is like easily explaining how to do a square of opposition, and then you will be able to do. And both, as I say, this can be questioned on a practical base also and on a theoretical base also. They can even ask like theoretically also, like what is a in this statement which is a particular positive statement. So that can also be asked. And next there is syllogism and fallacies. These are also 2 important topics where they can ask as in among these statements which type of fallacy occur. So understanding what are each types of fallacies, and then understanding there are like major, minor, and middle term. So these are some of the terms that occurs in each premises or the conclusion, and you might be asked to identify those. And Venn diagram, it appears in both the mathematical reasoning also. So through Venn diagram, we are actually applying the reasoning and seeing whether whatever is said in the question is true or not. So Venn diagram also, I'll always recommend, please learn it very thorough, because even if you don't have questions from the this logical reasoning, there might be questions from mathematical where you can apply the Venn diagram and solve the question. So Venn diagram is like a portion that overlaps. So I think learning this might actually increase your chance of having more marks. So what we have just covered is Western logic. And I think it's only recently that they have introduced Indian logic also into the syllabus. So basically, you need to understand how Indian philosophy, how it has been like in terms of like pramanas, what is happening. So the terms, I would say, please be like be familiar with these terms of like pratyaksha, like there are 6 pramanas in Indian philosophy, like pratyaksha, upamana, anumana. So all these Western logic also we are learning, but we need to understand what is it called in Indian philosophy too. So Indian logical reasoning. So that also you need to be familiar with, at least, because it is said that at least 5 question comes from one particular area. So if we take that there are 5 questions from a logical reasoning, then at least 2 of the questions come from the Indian logic. So I think if you just have an idea what it means, then I think you can score there. And there are also Indian school of philosophies, like there is Nyaya, Yoga, Sankhya, and Vedanta, which is considered as orthodox schools. And then there is heterodox schools like Buddhism and Jainism. So this, I think you'll be able to understand how the evolution has happened, and you can just prepare notes on like how which all has evolved in which century and how has it evolved and all. And also like anumana, like inferences, how it happens, and uh, fallacies of inferences I mentioned in the Western logic, like how fallacy occurs, and in Indian philosophy too, how does it occur. So Indian logic is also where you need to at least know what these terms are called, and I think understanding that itself will be able to get you solved. So I think we'll end here, and I think we'll take up questions, and if somebody wants to ask it in the chat box, they can. Otherwise they can just directly ask. What I just want to mention is that we, like, if you ask certain concept, we'll not be able to kind of explain, and I don't think that is the purpose of this tutorial. Maybe we'll be able to shed some light on how in order to like preparation or attending the exam, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Meera, am I audible?
Yes.
So yeah, before opening the platform like floor for like question answer, I would like to make a like small announcement that like some of you have already, and like some of your friends or classmates or even juniors might if you are registered for like joining, like volunteered for joining PSF, and we are reaching out to all of these people. And if any one of you or like any of your friends haven't received we haven't reached out to them, tell them that we will soon contact them, and we will make a talk. So yeah, that has to be announced. So yeah.
I think I'll take this question because it is exactly like in my position, which Toshiba is asking, that I'm from Department of Social Work, Children and Family. Currently, I'm in first year. I'm aspiring for NetJara. Being a teacher, how did you manage regarding? So I also did my masters in Children and Family, and also attended my NetJara, and I was able to crack it in the first time, regardless of the assignment readings. So what I would suggest is that now that it is late, that I think you hardly have like less than 3 weeks to prepare. So obviously you need to plan. Like if you're very serious about this, you have to plan, like maybe like before 1 month at least, because paper 1 there are 10 units, we just explained that, and paper 2 is like subject related, and subject related question, I would say there is a limit to how much you can score, and paper 1 is the only paper where you can score the most number of scores, because paper 1, even because it is testing your aptitude also. So even if you don't know certain concepts or certain themes, you'll be able to apply it in your own way and score there. But paper 2, if you don't know certain concepts, you can't, I mean, it's just a matter of like you just need to like find some option and then go ahead and see your luck. So paper 1 is, I would say, is the paper where you can score the most. I think planning it in terms of understanding which all areas is your strength, understanding which all areas your weakness is something which is like important in the first step, I would say. And I think you need to spend more time on the areas where you feel like you're lacking. So if you can see, there are 50 questions in paper 1, and each question carries 2 marks. So even if you like kind of attend 30 questions out of it, 30 to 35 is like a very, I mean, if you get to have the 30 questions correct, I would say, not attempting, you have to attempt all the 50 questions, because there is no negative mark. And also, in case if there is some question wrong, then only the students who have attempted will get the mark. If you haven't attended the question, you'll not be getting the mark. So I would say attend all the 50 questions. And paper one, if you are able to get like 30 to 35 questions correct, I would say you are in a safe place. You have done very well, I would say. So those 30 questions, you need to concentrate and see which all areas are your strength area. If you feel comprehension, mathematical and logical are your strength and areas, then concentrate. I mean, you make sure that you haven't missed out any important concepts of these themes, and prepare accordingly. So in that way, at least, like, let's say 3 areas you are in very much confident about. So there are like 15 questions. So you're sure about 15 questions, like you will be able to kind of manage those questions. And then there might be some areas which you are like 50%. Like sometimes I mean, sometimes you feel excelling in these areas, and sometimes you're not very well to this. So those questions also, I would say, areas also, I would say, prepare. And then see at least half of those questions, or if you say 10, there are 2 areas, so then there is 10 questions, at least 5 questions, if you're able to get it correct, that is good. And regarding the areas which you are not very confident of, you need to spend more time. You need to practice the questions from those areas the most, because what happens in these question papers is that it is almost, even if the questions is not same repeated, the area is too much repeated. So you can be sure that there is some area from where the question comes. Like, as I just mentioned in the research, sampling, a question is like a must in a paper. So if you cover the concept of sampling, then the probability that you will get a mark from any question that is coming out of sampling is high. So I would say, just prepare those questions relating to the area where you are not confident about, and then you will be able to, like, at least I would say 35 questions. If you can get it correct, it is well. So planning it in terms of how do you like divide these units, how much time to spend on each area, all depends on how comfortable you are with each area in this paper one. And paper two is like subject specific, so that you have to read and prepare notes and watch whatever videos you can, because when compared to past few years, the videos or the lectures or I mean the material on net, JRF is like too huge that even if you just type some keyword in the YouTube, like you get like 1,000+ videos. So, and that too in your regional language. I would, I mean, I see that you get it in your regional language too. So I would say there are too much of materials. So you have a possibility of understanding which are the some of the YouTube channels that are explaining the concept in a very simple way, where you can grab it like very easily. So, and watching the videos and all, because I think visually also, if somebody is like teaching us, then it gets into our head a little too fast than reading the material and preparing notes. But both are important, I would say. So yeah, I mean, in between tests also, I would say, if it was like 1 month before, at least spending 2 hours per day, I think that is fine. And when I think when the exam approaches, then you will not be able to find time for reading a new materials on the same papers. But I would say revising, like preparing the notes while you are preparing, and then revising those notes when the exam approaches, is some of the easy way. And I would say that's only feasible at this point of time. Gautam, you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, speaking forward from what Meera said, a good way to start would be do like at least 5 previous question papers. Okay, start with that. Like if you've not done anything so far, okay, like this is for people who've not started preparing. Okay? 5 question papers you do. Okay, do 3 question papers, which will give you some sense of which is your strong areas and weak areas, and very importantly, the time that you take. Okay? Time it and do it, which gives you a broad picture of which areas you find difficult, which areas you're finding it easier to do it, and which is very easy. And then when you prepare, go back and prepare these areas first. Okay, do as many questions as possible from these areas. Then maybe towards the end, maybe do one more round of one more set of question papers to see where you stand. So I think having some sense of, because uh, seeing the question paper for the first time in the exam is probably not the greatest thing. It'll really sort of throw you off. Some unexpected things can happen. So be prepared with the question, the full format of it, and the way you work on it. I think if you can map your strengths and weaknesses first, and then invest time, because you don't have a lot of time. So invest time accordingly. I think that would be the best way to sort of proceed from here. Yeah. And also, just a tip: there are many instances in these exams where you can really use, you can choose answers by omission. You know that a 4-2 cannot be an answer. So do look out for these things. Especially in things like data and reasoning. So by elimination, by a process of elimination, if you can do it, even better. You don't have to that'll help you cut a lot of time. And do not get stuck on one question. And also one important part of getting a sense of which is your time is also during the exam. You can do these sections in some order which is easier to you. That also helps.
So I'm also was a student of social work only. And I would say being in the master time is the best time to prepare NET, because you have things in hand. And second year is the ideal time. First year, you may not come across many of the concept, at least in the second paper, and also in the quantitative research and everything also. So ideal time is second year. But if first years anybody you are applied, it's okay. You can take it as a chance or practice. As rightly Meera said, like we need to focus on the preparation part. So if you are a first year now, and you can get planned in advance. So, and once you are out of masters and then you are thinking about preparation, then it's pretty difficult, because in this you have lots of assignments, your class are there, so everything is in your head. You just want to arrange it according to the our syllabus, according to Netka, according to Net's types. So it's easy for you to crack on during that time, because I have attended twice. After this life, attending is pretty difficult. If you start working and then getting into studies is pretty difficult. So you can, if you can manage at least 1 hour, 2 hours daily, then you can easily crack it down. So let us start. If you are a first year, then you can, because we could find only that one query. So that's why we are taking that. And SDG query I already answered. It's nothing to go into in depth.
Ma'am, another thing which I would like to ask is that whatever reading loaded on test, it is like in notes. So I kind of get like before class we have and apart
Your
from
voice
that,
is breaking here. Toshiba, your voice is breaking. We can't hear you.
okay, ma'am, I'll write it on the message.
Please take us name. We are not here. Don't call us ma'ams and all. Because first years in you getting to know that this and everything, so it will be hectic for you to time management. So by the end of first semester, you can get into the things. That's why I said second year would be a better time.
Okay, so somebody has asked like which subject should they choose in HRF. So Nitish, what I would say is that there is a brochure that UGC is kind of releasing. So in that brochure, you can find like if you are in certain discipline, then there's a subject that you can appear. So I would recommend you go and check the same brochure and understand like which subject you can, because not everybody is from the field that you're talking about. So we are not sure. Anyway, I'll just try to put the same file here so that you can check.
Yeah, obviously the PDF would help because anyway you have to read it for your classes. Like without reading, you can't complete your assignments. So obviously you can get materials for the net from there. Basically for the papers like environment and other things, development, your FC classes, other materials would really help. The one basic underline is go to the previous question papers, then you can know which all are your areas, strength and weakness, then build on your weakness part. That would be better.
So I've just shared the last year brochure, and I think all can just download it and like go through and see which subject you can appear for. It's okay, like if you want to ask like something very particular also, you can go ahead. It's fine. There is no like very formal questions that you need to ask.
And always looking the previous question paper, and these days I think when me and media, we all preparing, there was no this much YouTube channels and everything for the preparation. So these days we have lots of advantage. I'm again requesting, please don't take us with ma'am. Please take our name.
So one more thing that I would always recommend is that UGC site, UGC net site, you go, everybody please go and visit the same site, and they are providing you with a mock test. Okay, so people who are attending the exam for the first time, I would suggest whenever you see a computer screen, especially already you are very tensed and nervous, and on top of that you're seeing something very new to you and you don't know whether clicking something will go wrong. Is it my answer getting saved? So these are some of the tensions that is appearing when you appear for the first time that might occur. I would always suggest go through the UGC net site, and there's a link for a mock test. Take that mock test and understand which, so each question's status has a different colors. Understand what each color looks like, because when you answer any question, the question turns into some color, and if you just say the answer, it turns to other color. So just understand how to navigate through all this thing, because once you're confident about how is this exam conducted, or how we have to answer this question, half of your tension is gone. Then you just only need to focus on what is being like what all questions are being asked. So I'd always say please go try a mock test. And I think apart from UGC net also, there are different websites that gives you like opportunity to at least have a trial. So also you can then see what is the time that you're taking for paper 1, what is the time that you're taking for paper 2. So then that you get a sense of how much of time you need to spend on the same. So please go and check that out. Gautam, are you aware of any fellowship that one can have when they clear net? No.
No, there are no fellowships outside of JRF which is in any way related to NET. Now, NET does not give you a fellowship in that sense, but for certain universities, let's say if you're doing for a PhD or something, net clearing net becomes a criteria, right? Now, some places, some institutes might give you a default some sort of a fellowship if you clear their PhD. In that sense, it helps. Okay. Now, it is only if you clear JRF that you get that fellowship, that amount of money that you get every month. But like as I said, certain universities, certain institutes have certain PhD programs where net becomes a criteria, and if you clear it through other interviews and everything, then you get a stipend. Otherwise, there's nothing that is linked to.
Gautam, just explain that also. In TISS, it is not there. TISS is not one among that universities.
Yeah. TISS is not one of the one. TISS is very stingy with money. They'll try not to give you money as it is. Okay. But in TISS, there is no fellowship. There are some very specific schemes which can be available by certain sections of students. Apart from that, JRF is only like the only fellowship that that is sort of universally accessible to any student. Now there might be some fellowships such as ICSSR and stuff like that, which are much more specific. You have to apply and things like that. But JRF is the only fellowship that is a much wider coverage, and everything else is specific scheme based or specific policy based or specific institute based or something. For example, if you get into into IITs, they give you some amount of fellowship even if you don't have net or anything. So they get that. So yeah, that's the scene right now.
I think everybody is exhausted now that we have taken this much time. And yeah, we'll be all, I mean, while preparing, we'll be always available in case you have some queries regarding the same. There is email IDs that we have provided, and even the emails that you've got, you can just write back in the same email and ask for any query and whatever doubts that you will be having while preparing. And we'll be able to kind of guide you in that way. And is Alankrita here? Yeah, you can just wind up here. Yeah, I think she's also off. It seems. Okay, so thanks everyone for spending your time in order to crack the NET JRF exam with us. And we hope that you get through. And even if you don't get through, there are more kind of attempts that is left, and you'll be able to kind of crack it with more effort and more hard work. And we are also happy that we were able to help you with regarding the same, and all the best.